There's a reason why I think there is a difference for sustainability efficiencies, which can make a difference through all consideration of environments or in cost of service prices too high. And find ways
Hello everyone. My name is Mira Harka and together, okay. My name is Mira Harka and I'm a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University studying glaciology. Okay. Welcome to the Cryosphere Pavilion and this event on data as a basis for policy, innovation and education. And someone coming from high mountain Asia, I understand the importance of data and this session is very interesting. And I also want to welcome those of you watching virtually. And you can ask questions to the speakers at the end of this event or during the chat, and most of the questions will be answered in the Q&A session. And I would like to now welcome our first speaker and also the moderator for this session, Mira Halunukin, and she is a climate scientist at Finnish Meteorological Institute. And yeah, welcome. Yes, so welcome to this event titled Data as a Basis for Policy, Innovation and Education. So the event is organized by ACCC, which is the Atmosphere and Climate Competence Center of the University of Helsinki. And today we will have 5 short presentations prepared to give us inspiration in the form of concrete examples of how climate data is used to drive climate-smart policies, innovation and education. An important part of the event will follow after the talks and after the short panel discussion. There will be an interactive session. Thank you. There will be an interactive session with all of you, and we will provide a very low threshold opportunity for you to share your views regarding the status and challenges of using climate data in your sector. But first, let's go to the presentations, and I'll be the first one. So I am Dr. Mira Hulkkonen. I'm from Finnish Meteorological Institute, and I'm a climate scientist. I will talk about bringing climate data closer to individuals for increased policy acceptance and also for making it relevant for companies, investors and decision makers. So I'll first say a few words about the need for climate data in general, and then I will present 2 case studies about bringing climate data closer. So, none of us would be here if it wasn't for climate data, right? So measurements and modeled scenario data have provided us with the information that our emissions cause climate change. That information has led to knowledge and understanding that things need to change. However, when it comes to wise action, we are falling short of the goals that have been determined based on data. So data and information have not fully converted into wisdom, right? And why is that? So why is that? And is there something that we can do about it to bridge that gap between data and wise action? Those are the key questions that we are dealing with here today in this event. So this is a snippet of the interactive atlas by the IPCC. This particular image shows temperature data, and the tool itself is really handy. You can change scenarios and you can even zoom in to a specific region. But despite having these nice tools,
the information does not come close enough to individuals or businesses to really affect their decision making. Social scientists have identified something called psychological distance, which is more than just physical distance. Psychological distance has also three other dimensions, namely temporal, social, and hypothetical. And the larger the psychological distance, the less motivation is born out of the information to actually do something. So at individual level, psychological distance may show up as attitudes like this. Climate change will not affect people like me. And something like this leads to low acceptance of really ambitious climate policies. For businesses and the finance sector, the distance takes the form of not getting future probabilities right. So scenario data may be difficult to access, and importantly, the spatial resolution of the information is not high enough for the identified impacts and risks to feel relevant and be realistic. So psychological distance needs to be made smaller. And to show how that's done, I will present two case studies. First, I argue that seeing the consequences of climate action for people just like me will affect my perception of climate policies. With this personally tailored impact radar, we can show differences between different paths for individuals, for people just like you, just like me. The different paths include, for example, current legislation path, or then something more ambitious, so more ambitious emission reductions. And we show that no path is free of consequences to people just like you or me. So the numbers behind this graph are calculated for you on demand. So considering your exposure to risks in your location and your vulnerability based on your personal attributes, such as age, health, wealth. In this particular example, you see that for this individual, who is actually a currently middle-aged man in Helsinki, Finland, the current legislation path, which is the dark blue, it would significantly worsen the health issues caused by air pollution and heat stress in 2040 as compared to today. Whereas both of those risks, air pollution and heat, they can be clearly reduced with more ambitious climate action. The impact radar may take a while to grasp and understand. I mean, it's not that intuitive, but we have actually shown in our research that it has real potential for making climate data feel very, very personal and for affecting opinions about climate change, which will eventually increase the acceptability of ambitious climate policies. My second example is about downscaling modeled climate scenarios, so bringing them spatially closer, so that impacts, risks, and opportunities of future climate for businesses and investors, for example, can be identified in a very realistic and relevant way. A traditional scenario model will give us information for squares of 100 kilometer times 100 kilometer. But with something called convection permitting regional modeling, we can actually bring the resolution down to 1 kilometer times 1 kilometer. So this is something that enables the risks, impacts, and opportunities to be more reliably identified. And this information which is about a future brought close, like super close, because we are talking about a very specific spatial location. It's something that is clearly more relevant to any company or project. And that will allow investment, for example, investment decisions that are actually made based on data. Thank you, and I think I can take one question from the audience at this point, if you have any. Yes, can we have the mic, please?
So you had four dimensions in your psychological distance. The fourth one was hypothetical. Could you elaborate on this? I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, so the question was about what does hypothetical mean it was one of the dimensions in the psychological distance. So it is related to probabilities. So some phenomenon, for example climate change, may feel distant to you simply because you feel like the probability of something happening is quite low. So it's got to do with probability and getting it right. Thank you. So next we will hear from Marta Gutierrez, who is from the EGI Federation, and she will talk about building the European Green Deal data space. So Marta works with scientific communities and data providers around the world, contributing to EU-funded fair data projects. And Marta's previous experience is from European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasts. Please, Marta.
Okay, thank you everybody. Thanks Mira for the introduction. I am going to introduce the great project, as Mira has said, which is going to build the foundations for the European Green Deal data space. So just to set up the scene, we are all here, we are all interested in climate change, and we are all data professionals in a way. And why do we need to talk about data? You may have heard this statement from many data professionals. The world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but data. This was a statement that came out in The Economist back in 2017. But just to give you some facts, because we all humans like data facts, there's been a study about the European data economy. It has been estimated to be 440 billions back in 2021, and this figure will most likely double by 2025. So that's just, we are looking at the financial value of the data. But if we go further, what is the real value of the data? And we know that the data needs to be one of the main key ingredients to tackle the societal challenges that we are dealing with, as known by the very famous United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we need data to tackle the environment, to tackle climate change. That's what we are here for. But not just about that. We need data to tackle global health, to tackle education, to tackle equality, incident response, as well as humanitarian crisis, as we've all done with COVID. And we need to ensure that we need data to tackle not just economic growth, but we need green economic growth. So what is Europe doing about it? Two very important communications in Europe. The European Data Strategy released what we call the single market. The European strategy was a communications that was released in 2020, and it's aiming for a single market data. In the same way that we've achieved the single currency and the free flow of people, we need to achieve the free flow of data in Europe. So it's going to launch all this idea by the launching of common European data spaces, and all these data spaces are going to be sectorials. The second communication that it's important here is the European European Green Deal that it was launched in 2019, and it's looking at tackling climate and environmental-related challenges in a holistic and integrated way. So it's looking at mobility, it's looking at the circular economy, it's looking at biodiversity, energy, it's looking at at the pollution, as well as agriculture, the farm to fork strategy. So it's a set of policy initiatives. Okay. And the Green Deal data space, out of these two communications, the Green Deal data space came out. It's a federation of data ecosystems looking at multi-stakeholders like policy makers, businesses, researchers, and citizens, looking at data in Europe, but as well as around the world, because climate change does not happen only in Europe. So, that's the wrong way. There you are. So what are data spaces and why now? So instead of giving you, there's a plethora of definitions in data spaces that they're always boring to read in presentations, so I'm going to tell you the why of the data spaces. We need, as we said, we need a free flow of data in a single market. We need to access data in a cross-disciplinary domains. We need a standardized data practices. We need to connect data silos, so we know that data is spread all over in different domains, so we need connectivity between all of those. We need to empower innovation with data, and we need to create new business models that will allow all this innovation. And we need data sovereignty. So what is this data sovereignty concept? Is the right that the data, all those that have the rights of the data are in charge of deciding who is going to control and what are the terms and conditions to access that kind of data. And we need to do this in the context of our regulatory framework, and with a set of values that preserve privacy, security, and the level playing field of all those stakeholders. And why are we doing this now? Because we are technologically ready. We have applications like artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, as well as digital tools that are all hungry for data. So this is the project. We have a very big consortium. We just started, but I will go ahead with that. We have experts in the field, and we're going to be running for the next 18 months. What are our pillars? We are looking at three main pillars. We are looking at buildings reference architectures. Okay, sorry. We are looking at reference architecture models, so we are looking at governance rules as well as the business models, and we are looking at what are those data sets that are important to tackle the Green Deal policies. We are doing this with the base of the community. We need to do this for the community, so they tell us what is important out here, and what we're going to build is a roadmap. It's a roadmap for what does it mean for anyone that is participating in a data sharing initiative to join a data space. So we are doing this exercise through looking at use cases. So these are two examples of use cases. The Global Cryosphere Watch that is looking from WMO, that is looking at cryosphere data in support of Earth system monitoring and modeling and prediction. This is a well-established network with very well-established rules in WMO, and as opposed to a WIN research infrastructure, which is a newly established research infrastructure that is looking at what the combination of all the chemicals that we're exposed to, what is the effect on a human health. So for that, they really need to look at data in a multidisciplinary domain. And each of these two use cases will bring very different requirements, because we are looking at well-established data sharing initiatives versus all of those that are new research infrastructures that are looking at how to access all this data in a multidisciplinary domain. And that's what we are here for. We are here for try the community engagement at its best. We are looking for anyone, data consumers, data providers, or intermediaries that are making use of Green Deal data related to strategic actions such as biodiversity, zero pollution, or climate change, of any of the other actions that are part of the Green Deal. How can you contribute? You can come and talk to us and tell us what data sets do you have, what do you use them for. You can
contribute with a use case, or you can tell us what problems or what data is missing that you're aware of, and how can you help us the project. We are going to co-design and validate with all the community. So what is in there for you? You can become part of the community, of the Green Deal community. Have your say, come to our events, and contribute with us to the roadmap design and more. So those are our contact details. So please come and talk to us, and we would love to hear from you. Do we have time for questions? Yeah, one question.
Hi, is it going? Oh, thank you. I just had a question. The second to last slide. Oh no, one more back. On the effects of chemical exposure to human health, you have genetics up there, and in what context is genetics up on there, please?
So they are looking at all the biomarkers as well, and how all of this and all the chemical exposures, yeah, and how all of this in combinations with all the biomarkers and with all the DNAs, if there is, what are the relationship with all the chemicals exposures in there. So it's very interesting.
I can imagine that would spook some people about then insurance companies getting that information, and that data protection would be important, because you may find that you would fall out of healthcare or being able to be insured for healthcare if you had a wrong marker.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. Ben?
Thank you, Marta. Next, we will have Dr. Scott McEnroe, Head of Insights and Innovation from Vaisala. Scott is an established leader in the areas of numerical modeling, machine learning, and environmental monitoring. Scott is also the Director of Engagement and the founder of the non-profit 1000cretas.org that helps to accelerate innovators who pursue climate change solutions. And Scott will be talking about Xweather of Vaisala and some other things as well. So welcome, Scott.
All right, thank you so much. Before I begin, I just want to thank all of you for your continued efforts. It's inspiring to listen to all of you, and actually just an honor to even be in the room. My talk here is really about data as the basis of innovation. As the head of innovation, that was kind of a relevant topic for me. For those of you not familiar with Vaisala, for about 86 years now, we've been a major part of the backbone of the global weather infrastructure, starting with the Radiosonde. That's probably our biggest claim to fame. Xweather is in many ways the backbone to digital technology. The first thing I want to do is offer a little bit of perspective about data, especially when it comes to innovation, and then I'll give you some examples of ways that we're using data in innovative ways today to address the impacts of climate change, largely in terms of weather. So. Thank you, sir. All right. My dear colleague Samli Hananen always reminds us that when you're going to solve a problem, you have to first measure and quantify that problem. Once you do that, you have the ability to actually learn and understand about that problem, and then you can build solutions. Right? If there's any good news about climate change, is we have the ability to do every one of these steps. We can measure and quantify the impacts. We do understand this, and we can come up with solutions. At the very beginning of this process, you're creating massive amounts of data. Weather and climate, I often remind people, is the original big data problem. Tremendous amounts of information. So inherently, when you're innovating in weather and climate, data is maybe not just a basis, but perhaps even the basis for those innovations. I've been doing this about 20 years, and I always like to kind of stop for a moment and just offer some perspective about data. And from my point of view, I just want to remind everybody that data really is not created equal. When you're thinking about data, especially for something as important as the impacts of climate change, it's important to think about some of these topics in your considerations. First one I'll talk about is quality. Humans have a very bad habit of introducing their own biases when it comes to data. When you're creating data for these purposes, really thinking about whether that data meets the needs of your project is very important. Good example of this is this term representativeness. There's a tremendous number of solutions and studies out there that are using data that is tens, if not hundreds of kilometers away from the local environment that you're trying to solve for. In many ways, when you have the opportunity to solve a problem like this, taking those extra steps to make sure that you're representing that local environment is very important. Record length is something that I see a lot of problems with out there. Oftentimes when you're using different types of sensors, and many projects will be very short-lived, you may be measuring something like a La Nina event and then trying to apply that to a situation that is not a La Nina. All things that we need to consider often. Precision. If you had two sensors in the same place, would they give the same answer? I'm all about data. I believe that some data is better than no data, but there's a tremendous number of ways to generate data these days, and we have to be very careful with the technologies available to us. And then finally, extensibility. We're very lucky in some developed nations to be able to measure and develop solutions, but many times those solutions cannot be extended to other parts of the globe. In many ways, these solutions are not equitable, and we really need to think about this. Now, these are topics I can go on about, but I have limited time, and so I want to kind of move on to some ways that we're using data today in innovative ways. First example I'm going to give is about energy. Energy is on the mind of many people around the globe, and energy companies are doing what they can to keep up on some of the events that we're seeing, hotter hots and colder colds, right? Vaisala X-Weather worked with a company called Fortum out of the Helsinki region. And in this particular case, their problem was that they were trying to do demand planning for some of the regions you see here in the orange dots, maybe the glowing orange dots around the Espoo region. For those of you not familiar, that's a big technology hub in Helsinki. And so what we do is we begin with these public weather stations, and using some data simulation technology, we're able to get a sense of the area of influence of those sensors. I've tried to depict that here with the orange. Because of the prevailing winds, there's a bit of an easterly shift to this data, and you can see that we're sort of missing that local environment that's necessary. So in this case, it was less about just using existing data and creating data. So we're lucky enough at Vaisala to have a tremendous number of sensing technologies available. So we deployed our Atmocast in very strategic locations, using that same data simulation technology to find out where we can fill in these gaps. Now, these circles are really just representativeness. The actual shapes are a little uglier, so I wanted to keep it pretty. And so if I add the green dots on here, maybe, there we go. You can kind of see how we kind of filled in a lot of those gaps with that data that allowed us to really measure that local environment. And then, of course, we then take that, combined with numerical weather prediction and machine learning to enhance those forecasts. So across the board, you can see how the data really does drive down the errors in those forecasts, especially in the situations where you have these spikes. We're essentially mitigating some of those impacts. Another example, water use. Water is another problem of our time that you hear more and more about. I fear that my children are also going to have to deal with this in the future. And we have a lot of clients who are trying to make intelligent water decisions. And some of the data that they have off the shelf is really causing them some problems. And especially when it comes to things like smart irrigation. So irrigation is one of the major tools leveraged in agriculture. And a lot of these companies would traditionally use something like a climate normal 30-year average. And what they're finding is those 30-year averages are not representative of what we're experiencing today, and they do not match where we're projecting to see. Now, that's not news to climate scientists, but that is news to a lot of folks out in the public. In addition, a lot of the times irrigation is taking place very far away from the observations are being taken. So we have that representativeness problem. So to tackle both of these, we're doing things like creating high resolution data sets that are filling in some of those gaps, using as many observations as we can, pairing that with modeling, but also shortening the record so that we can point by point give something that's more representative of what we're experiencing today. This becomes the foundation that allows them to make those smart irrigation. We have a lot of work still to do here. Observations needed everywhere, but it's a really great start. And then maybe one more example that maybe we don't think about, something very practical day to day, like road safety. So Vaisala's been involved in road safety for more than 2 decades now. 1 in 4 traffic incidents and accidents is still impacted by weather. In this particular case, we have lots of examples similar to the Fortum case, where adding local environments really helps us drive forecasting temperatures down. And this becomes really the basis for some of our road weather technology. And so what you're looking at here in the US and Europe are really pretty pictures, but these are all of the roadway networks where we're able to talk about, are the roads wet? Are they dry? Are they icy? Right? And in this particular case, I'm sharing this because we often think about data as the basis for innovation, but it's actually very cyclical, right? On the bottom left, 20 years or so, the RWIS station, the road weather information systems come out. This allows us to have data that becomes the basis for some of these models that you see. What we learn from this data set helps us innovate and recognize that we needed more technology. We develop things like our IoT sensors that don't require power and lower cost. That helps us fill in some of these gaps. And we continue to learn and innovate on that. So oftentimes data is not just the basis for innovation, but those innovations then lead us to the need for more data. And so I'll just leave you with one of the problems that we're facing today. Is this road dry? You may not think about this as a climate impact, but our clients definitely are asking the question left and right. But in this particular case, more data is needed because the answer is, well, maybe, right? And so hopefully you don't have too many of these problems that we face, but happy to chat about with any of these with you today. Thank you for your time. One question, yes.
Sorry, you've got a farmer in the room and we're just so inquisitive about stuff. So the amount of data you're collecting for the weather, and as you spoke about irrigation, etc., are you able to add other things to your sensors as they come along? I presume you can, to be able to pick up our emissions, for example, so we can get better real-time information about some of our practices and therefore we can change them?
Yeah, that's kind of the goal. A lot of times when people think about innovation, they're always thinking sort of tip of the spear and new, but a lot of times innovation is nothing more than finding new and novel ways to connect data and add things on top of it. And it does become that cyclical learning process. Of course, the goal in the end is really to help make those decisions, but I do believe it begins with collecting data and really understanding that problem first. One more? Do we have time or? Okay. My timekeeper says we're good. Yeah.
Thank you so much for a great presentation. My name is Tuuli Kaskinen and I come from Climate Leadership Coalition. We know that Vaisala is one of those really leading producers of these tools to do measuring. What's the biggest bottleneck for your kind of entering to the whole world with your machines, which would definitely help all of us to solve these crises? But
I need that question one more time. I'm sorry. It's very loud. Yeah.
Sorry, I was asking that your tools are really leaders globally in this field of doing analysis in the field. If we had those like all over the world, that would make the work of all of us easier. What's the biggest bottleneck for you? Who would do what? Who would need to do what for your tools to be spread globally even further?
That's a great question. Yes. These sensing technologies, you're right. I mean, I agree. We have very robust, wonderful technology, and they last a long time, and there are costs associated with that. And really, that kind of goes back to this mention about equitable solutions, right? It is a challenge. I'm going to, somewhat blame capitalism in a way. Really, that's kind of what we're up against. And so, you heard I work for a company, but I also run a nonprofit. That's kind of a good answer as to, well, if I'm going to try to address all of these, so far I haven't found a way to do it in both. Vaisala is trying to put that together, but it's going to be a process. And hopefully there's more companies trying to do exactly that. But it's an excellent question I don't have a direct answer for. So, okay. And I'm happy to chat. Oh, one more quick.
Yeah, just a quick question. So you mentioned earlier that you have been working on data innovation for almost 20 years now. I was wondering if you have also worked with the stakeholders and clients from mountainous communities or maybe hydropower companies, and how has that experience been so far? If you could just share your experiences.
And I apologize. The sound is really tough. And in the interest of time,
Okay, so-
maybe you and I can connect after.
Yeah, that would
is
be
that better?
perfect. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm very
thank you.
interested, but I want to be mindful. So thank you.
Yes, we'll have room for questions later on. So let's move on with our presentations. Next, we will have something about something called climate attribution science. So we have Dr. Andrew Pershing, who is the Director of Climate Science at Climate Central. Andrew focuses on expanding public awareness and understanding of climate science across disciplines. And previously, he served as Chief Scientific Officer for the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. So welcome, Andrew, to talk about climate attribution science.
All right, thank you for giving me a chance to talk here today. So I'm going to talk about how we localize climate information. So I'm going to talk specifically about our new Climate Shift Index tool, which focuses on air temperature. But if you'd like to see some other examples of work that we do at Climate Central, several of these posters have some of the maps from our sea level rise program, and then photos over there from our Picturing Our Future program. So we're of course here because of concerns over global warming, right? Climate change, rises in global temperature. A big part of all of the discussions that are taking place over there is how to go from the red curves that we're currently on to one of the bluer curves that we would like to be on, right? That's the 1.5 degree goal. The challenge, though, is that we don't live in global mean temperature. This is not something we experience, right? We here in the climate change world experience it, right? We think about the data, we contextualize it, but most humans on the planet don't experience global mean temperature. So they experience climate change through the weather that they encounter day to day. And so that's a big part of what we try to do. So whether it's an extreme heat wave like this one that took place in the Pacific Northwest in the US last summer, or just, you know, an ordinary hot day. If you work on climate change, somebody is going to ask you, is it climate change or is it the weather? And so that's what attribution science is about. So this is a National Academy of Sciences study from the US that came out more than 10 years ago that talks about the state of the science of extreme event attribution. So the ability to actually link weather events to climate change. The key is that we're not answering the why question. We're not, or the cause question. We're not saying that climate change caused a particular event. What we're saying is that climate change was a detectable part of the drivers. It was part of the signal that led to that event. We're going to usually talk about this in terms of the change in the likelihood of the event. So that creates communications challenges, right? Because people don't normally think in terms of probabilities unless you're a gambler. So we're going to, but we often have to think about this in terms of probabilities and changes in likelihood. Very occasionally, we can talk about event attribution in the form of magnitude. The climate change, if you hadn't had climate change, the event would have been smaller, and you can quantify how smaller that event would be. World Weather Attribution and other organizations have been really leading this charge in terms of developing the algorithms and the techniques that allow you to do this, getting those techniques through the peer review and established in the scientific community so that they can now take those techniques and apply them within a week or two after a major event and come out with statements like the Pacific Northwest event, that it was about a 1 in 1,000 year event, that it almost could not have happened without climate change. But this is even getting faster. And so there was a study that was released after Hurricane Ian, which hit Florida in the United States about a month ago, about 6 weeks ago. Within 2 days of landfall, Stony Brook University was able to release a study that showed how climate change had influenced the amount of rain in that storm. So the way we do this and the way we work with our Climate Shift Index is we talk about temperature. We look at temperature at a particular place in the planet for a particular season, and we characterize the distribution, right? What temperatures we expect to have a lot of, what temperature we expect to be rare in our current climate. And then we simulate a climate that does not have global warming, where we did not put extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that's our 0 degree climate. we do this with a variety of techniques. We have a paper that was published by Daniel Guilford at Climate Central last summer that talks about multiple methods, and that's really an important part of our study. Just like weather forecasts are built upon an ensemble of models running at different scales under different assumptions, we're trying to come up with our analysis based on some different ways of looking at the climate problem. The ones on the left are very focused on data and trends at a local location. The examples on the right use climate models that are run with and without anthropogenic greenhouse gas forcing. So this is our climate shift index tool. This is what we developed a few years ago. I'm sorry, this is what we released a few weeks ago, our global climate shift index map. You can see that we have, so you can get it at csi.climatecentral.org. It's an interactive map. The colors are telling you, they're not telling you where things are necessarily hot or cool, although it generally lines up that way. What the colors are doing is they're telling you the places where we can look at the temperature on that day and we can say that climate change was having a detectable, quantifiable influence on those temperatures. And that's what our scale indicates. So the dark brown areas, like if you look over the Arabian Peninsula, that's level 5 on our scale, which is 5 times more likely due to climate change. You'll see areas that are orange, right? Orange is twice as likely, or a level 2 on the scale. And then there are a few places that are gray, and those places are encountering conditions, generally cooler conditions, that are less likely due to climate change. So cool conditions still happen, they just happen less frequently, and we wanted to quantify them. So today, according to the Climate Shift Index, we have about 770 million people. This is actually from a couple days ago. We had Addis Ababa in Ethiopia has had a very long streak of days at level 3 times more likely. And we have several really interesting cities that were hitting level 5 all over the world. And so again, to Mira's point, this is really about trying to localize and personalize climate change. If you go to that QR code, you'll see that we have a study that we called 365 Days on a Warming Planet. And that allows you to look at how climate change over the last year influenced different places around the globe. A major highlight of that was that the tropics have experienced a lot more detectable climate change than higher latitudes have. The small island states have experienced more detectable climate change than those of us living on the larger parts of the continents. And then there are major cities like Lagos, Nigeria, comes up as a city where it's had a very intense shift in its climate and where you have tens of millions of people living there. And so very intense impacts in some of these highly populated areas around the world. So thank you very much. Yes, I'm sorry, do you have any questions? All right, fantastic. I will be around if anybody would like to talk. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. Our last speaker is Marianne Santala from the Institute for Atmospheric and Earth System Research at the University of Helsinki. Marianne's research is about climate change leadership and competencies. And she's also involved in teaching and developing multidisciplinary climate change courses. Marianne will talk about climate competencies today. What are they all about and how can we build them? So welcome, Marianne.
Thank you, Mira. I'm grateful to be here today and have this opportunity to tell you about education that we have developed in Finland, and the aim for this education is to build. So the purpose of the education is to build climate competencies, better climate competencies in society. By climate competencies, I mean the critical skills, knowledge, values, and attitudes that are needed in climate change mitigation and adaptation. University of Helsinki and Finnish Meteorological Institute are currently making research on these climate competencies in a project called Learning of the Competencies of Effective Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation in Education System. In addition to research, it includes development of education and tools for climate and weather data. Serving open education possibilities for professionals and educating young people on climate data and decision making can help to bridge the gap between data providers and end users. Therefore, I will present you the new university course that we are currently developing. It's called Living with Changing Climate. And it's meant for master students as well as professionals who want to develop their competencies by in-service training. It's about handling data, so it includes different modules that are about weather and climate data in general, how they can be used and interpreted, what kind of decisions can be made based on that. Students will use case examples on how the decisions are made. Students will also learn and gain their skills in practice by using open data portals and making projects, interview projects with business or public organization. In this course, students will, as I mentioned, they will use open data portals. Finnish Meteorological has developed data platform for the students to more easily access these portals, and it provides tools and instructions on how to use and visualize this data. You can see the list of the data portals available there. It's going to have its own proper website, but so far it's available at GitHub and it's public, so you can go to explore it if you're interested. Next, I will tell you about Climate University. This new course will be part of Climate University course offerings. It is a network of 27 higher education institutes in Finland, and it offers climate and sustainability related courses nationwide in Finland for students at the network institutions, as well as for professionals through open universities. So university students can register in these courses, but they are actually available for everyone without registering the course. So you can go to see all the materials at the course platform and visit the website and you'll find them there. Okay, sorry about that. A couple of the university courses I just showed you are actually not only available in Finland, but across Europe through this Una Europa network. It is European Universities initiative of 11 research-intensive universities, and it offers the digital micro-credential in sustainability. the scope is 10 ECTS, and the idea is that anyone can easily study these online at their own pace. So now we are coming to the end. My last 2 points are, first, if you got some inspiration to study, just visit Climate University or Una Europa website. The second, if you want to offer your insights or share them with students, you can contact me, and we can discuss about you if you want to, for example, give an interview on data and decision making, or if you know some nice use case example on that. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Marianne. Now I would like to invite all of our speakers here in the front for a short round of comments regarding today's theme. Sorry about that. So. Yeah, please, Marianne. That's fine. And could we please have a mic here in the front? Yeah. Thank you. So I have a few questions for you, and I hope that these questions will also help our audience to orientate to the interactive session that will follow straight after this. So today we have all presented tools to bridge the gap between climate-relevant data and its effective end use. Is there something specific that you hope to achieve by showcasing your work here at COP27? So if we could take a short round. Please, Marta, you can start.
Hello? Yeah, okay. So for us in particular, that we are setting the foundations to build the Green Deal data space. We don't want to build yet another data ecosystem that is made by IT people. We want a community. We really want to engage with the community and to do this in a collaborative manner. So as I mentioned, it was a very strong call in my slides to engage with anyone that is dealing with data, from the consumer aspect as well as from the provider aspect for it. It's really important that we get all the data that we need for to tackle climate change and to tackle all the Green Deal policies and priorities.
I think there's the theme of what I'm trying to show is sort of the importance of those local measurements. I think especially what we hear a lot from clients is it's not a question of climate change at large scales, but things that really impact them. I don't know how applicable that is to the general public, but I'm going to guess that it's a very similar thing. Really getting the impacts down at the local level requires a tremendous amount more data than we even have available to us today. So really just about the local environment.
Yeah, similar to Scott, I think that's one of our big hopes is to make climate change local. We really want people to be able to understand how their particular experience is being altered by climate change. And so that's very different depending on where you live in the world. It's very different depending on how old you are, in terms of your history with change on the planet. And so we want to make people aware that there are tools that allow you to do this in a very quantitative way that could support, we think, some interesting analysis and decision making in the future.
We are looking for new ideas for this course that we are currently developing. Like, what should we teach on that course so that it would really help students and professionals to more effectively use the data.
Yeah, thank you. And I personally hope to spark some interest and maybe inspiration when it comes to different ways of actually bringing data closer. to either individuals or businesses, and making it really relevant, making it matter. So this event is about bridges. So what is still needed for the bridges to be complete? What is needed for data to become effectively used in different sectors that are relevant for climate change? So this question to anyone in our panel.
Okay, so for us, from the Green Deal data space perspective, I think all the standardization, it's quite a very important activity. We would love to make use of all the tools that your guys are using, and to use them in a harmonized way. So together with governance, we need all to have an understanding. All those that have the power of using the data, we need rules at the end of the day. In the same way that we have rules in the roads, we need some kind of governance as to what we can and what we cannot do with the data. How far can we go, and how important is the data that we're dealing with?
I love this question. I'm almost answering with the question. We need bridges, right? In my presentation, I talk a lot about what I can do for my clients, but even in the questions about how do we get it out there more, I have limited ability to do that because I need more clients, and that's not the ones who are always suffering, right? I need access to NGOs. I need access to politicians because I didn't say anything about policy, because why would I? I don't know anything about policy. So it really is those bridges and getting everybody in the room. Yeah.
I think we have a last mile problem in data, that we can often come up with a really good analysis. We can sometimes come up with a nice metric that we're, as scientists, we're really excited about. And I think we have that last mile problem of how do you actually characterize that in a way that has an impact on people, where they see what that means and can intuit that on a daily basis. So we worked really hard on the colors, on the scale that we're put on the Climate Shift Index, and I'm absolutely convinced that we haven't gotten it right yet. And I know that that's something where we're going to have to put a lot more work.
Well, from my point of view, of course, the education is important, but I think we also need new tools, and the data should be more accessible.
Yeah, thank you. I would answer to this question that the data needs to be presented in a way that is understandable and realistic and simply relevant for the end user. So we climate scientists, we know where to find data and how to handle it, but professionals from different sectors do not necessarily have the needed skills. So education is the answer also in that perspective. So my last question to the panel. So as we focus on end users today, can you give a few examples of challenges that you might expect the end users to have when it comes to effective usage of climate information?
Okay, so the challenges, yes. So I'm going to pick up on where you left it, and I think data literacy, it's quite important. We need all the educational part of it. Not only users, they need to understand the technology, all the AI and machine learning and data analytics. They need to understand the regulations. What does it mean? Regulations many times comes in the shape of contracts that are written by lawyers that in many cases they live in an ambiguous way, so they have a room for negotiations in there. So that's quite a difficult aspect of that, and even beyond the regulations, we need to understand the ethical aspects of it. What happens if you get your data wrong? And some of the acts on artificial intelligence are quite scary. Yeah, what happens when all your AI systems are doing the wrong thing? So these are some challenges. Yeah.
I'm going to go with data access in a lot of ways. We're producing tremendous amounts of information, and I go back to the question again: how do you get this accessible to everybody in ways? Yeah.
So a lot of our tools are developed for the media to be able to use them to cover climate change as a topic. And a big barrier that we hear from them, a couple of them are, one is they really want more local information. It's very hard in the United States, for example, for a TV meteorologist in a particular location to show a national map. Their producers don't like that. They want them to show a much more zoomed in map. So that's one of the challenges that we face. The other is just, I think, the perception among the media that climate change is not a topic that there's an audience for. When in reality, most people in the United States, at least, according to the surveys, want more climate information. They want to hear about it. They want to talk about it. They're concerned about it. And that's just very different than I think the narrative that a lot of editors have in their head.
I'm widening this topic from climate data to climate information in general. I think one challenge is that there is a lot of information, and sometimes it's for experts hard to know which is relevant for them, and keep up with all the new information that is coming all the time with a fast pace. So that's definitely one issue.
Yeah, so maybe better designed information products could help to answer that. Okay, thank you to our panel. So next, it will be your turn to tell us if climate data is actually used in your sector, if it's used effectively, and if not, what are the challenges? And we have made it super easy for you, and the threshold to contribute can't really get any lower. So I hope that you all get involved in this part. So we have prepared 7 topics related to the end use of climate data. And we would like to hear whether everything is okay regarding them in your field, or if things need to improve. So please go to www.menti.com and type in the code that you see on the slide. And there you will find these 7 questions. And on a scale of from 1 to 5, please indicate your view. And this will then give us an impression of where do the challenges lie. Let's look at the results after a few minutes after you have typed in your answers. Thank you. Okay, I wonder if everybody has now typed in their answer. We have 11 at least. No, they are still moving. Let's wait for a little bit more.
Okay, let's start unwrapping this. It seems to me that the willingness to consider climate change in your sectors is high, as it's supposed to be, and I guess that's also the reason why we are all here today. But then, when it comes to tools to get relevant information, we are just kind of in the middle of our scale from 1 to 5. So things are almost leaning towards that there is a need to improve that, and same goes for using data. Finding data is actually quite high. We have, I think, 3.3 if I see correctly. So we know that data is there, and we even know where to find it. But then something is still needed in order for data to actually turn into knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. I wonder if there's anybody in the audience who would like to comment from their perspective, whether it's policy, media, business. Like we really want to understand where the challenges lie when it comes to using climate data in different sectors.
Thank you very much. I'm from Climate Leadership Coalition, which is a coalition of 95 business members from Nordic countries. And I think there are huge differences between different industries. Like if we talk about energy industry, it starts to be quite clear where the data is, where you can find it, how to use it. But then especially the questions dealing with land use, forestry, agriculture, food, that's where there is still, I think, challenges in all of these. We don't know actually many things still. We don't want to know. We don't want to use that knowledge and all of that. So at least that's one clear example of whole industry and whole area where there is still, which is still kind of lacking behind, and where the resources next should be brought in. We know how important in energy sectors it was that the kind of IPCC and all that data and work became available and changed the mindsets of people. So that's at least one point of view, that the industries come in different pace.
Yes, thank you, Tuuli. Anybody else? Yes, please, here.
Thank you. We've been talking a lot about bridges, and I'm wondering who is supposed to build these bridges. You know, as a scientist, as a researcher, from your funders, they are all the time asking about your impact or the impact of your research, and you have to. So there's a lot of pressure on the scientists themselves to build these bridges. Do you think it's the normal way to go? Should there be science brokers in between? What is your view on that?
Yes, an excellent point. There is definitely the pressure for us scientists to build these tools, but we need to understand what kind of tools are needed in order to be able to build the right tools and the right kind of bridges. So for that reason, this kind of events are excellent, and I feel like more could be done when it comes to actually interacting with policymakers and with different stakeholders, with businesses, and really talk with them what do you need. But actually, I would have a follow-up regarding this actually to Scott, who has experience from both a company, building bridges in a company, and building bridges as part of a non-profit. I like to hear what kind of differences are there when it comes to building bridges in these two very different contexts.
Sure. Unfortunately, the common denominator seems to be money. A lot of people maybe don't understand that in private industry, especially when you're a public company, you have a legal obligation to maximize profits, for better or worse. That's the nature of a corporation. And in a nonprofit, you're reliant on, money from essentially the hearts of other people in many ways. Sometimes you can get grants. And so actually, I like the question. I was thinking to myself, I thought to myself, well, neither one of my sides really. So the answer is, I'm not sure then. um, so yeah, I don't know if that helps. I don't know the answer, and I'm on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, let's give the mic to Marta.
Yeah, I like the question a lot. The bridges mean different things to different people. For your researchers, it's like, what is the value that I get, yeah, from showing all this data or sharing all this data with the world? And for researchers, they are very driven into publications, because that's the way for them to get funding and to get visibility out of there. For the industry, it may be profit. For policymakers, it might be, are we fulfilling all these policies? So we are studying all these different value-added aspects of it when we are going to build bridges in there. There are lots of, and that's why we are here, to show all the different perspectives.
Just one more comment. Another thing popped in my head. The interesting thing is we all want the same thing, and we all just have different funding mechanisms. And I haven't really figured out where they overlap yet to answer this question. But I think sometimes it's just an important to put the question out there so we can think about this as it is having the answer. So. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, Andrew, I'll just say a few words. So I personally think that it's really important to loudly communicate the benefits of using data and using these information tools, whether it's for companies or policymakers or media. We really have to very clearly communicate what are the benefits and what kind of synergies might there be if they started using the products that we have developed. Yeah, thanks. So Andrew.
Yeah, just very quickly, I would add that I think education has a big role here, and so I'm glad we had education on this panel, because I think Bitcoin is a really amazing example of how climate education failed in computer science, right? Computer scientists were not trained to think about carbon and energy as a problem. Therefore, they developed Bitcoin, which is a nightmare from kind of a climate, energy, and conservation point of view. Oh, sorry. And I think we can see that in other fields. So you really cannot be a competent professional in this current decade and not have a baseline understanding of the climate problem.
Yes, thank you. Do we have any other comments from the public? Yes, they're in the back.
Hey, thanks for opening this up for questions. This is amazing. I work in the climate communication space as a content creator. And certainly there are a lot of people in science communication, but the willingness to consider climate change extends more broadly, like well beyond science communicators. But I think that other creators with large audiences don't have the ability to easily access and understand how to read scientific data. Like if you went to college and studied this through your schooling, you understand how to get access to abstracts, how to read that easily. But even now, being out of school and in this career for a while, it's harder and harder for me even to get access to data because it's behind a paywall or something on some kind of online resource. So all that to say, I think that for creators, the main thing that is easily accessible is the IPCC report once a year. It would be awesome to have a more collective forum by which don't have easy access to an academic institution can just look through data in a more understandable way that's less geared towards scientifically literate individuals. Yeah, so that's just
yes, excellent point. Thank you. I was wondering if Marianne, you might want to comment on this because the courses that you have been developing, they partly address this issue. So you teach people where to find open access data and how to use that and how to read that also. So is there something you want to say? Well, Yes, I think we are we are partly trying to. Um, well, we have developed the courses I presented. um, they are partly for that reason that anyone could learn about these things. Although personally, I think that they should be even more accessible. Like, and people don't know about them, so there should be some kind of marketing. How people know where to go and where to find like easy information. But that's definitely one aim for us, that those courses should be more. They are more multidisciplinary, so that they are meant for, and they have students for from different disciplines. So the information is quite understandable, even though you're not a natural scientist. But there's still a lot to do, definitely. And yeah, thanks.
Yes, thank you. I think one important point to remember is that all the end users are human after all. So we really need to, I think it's on our shoulders as scientists and data providers and data brokers to really remember that we are human and we have to take our psychological tendencies into account and really tailor the information so that it's easy to grab and to remember that, for example, probabilities are super difficult for many people to really understand. So we need to find ways, maybe with the help of social scientists or psychologists, to communicate the information and the data in such a way that we consider and take these things into account. Yeah. So Marta, you had something on mind.
I really like the psychological distance concept. We are all talking about what is the overlap between all these different perspectives, and I guess things like climate change, and when you see it right in your face, how it's affecting you, if you see it like it's affecting your health, or it's going to affect the health of your children. So trying, because sometimes the presentation of scientific data is too complex. Yeah, when we show a graph with probabilities in there, that doesn't reach out enough to the public, to all the citizens. In there. So there are different messages to put across to different people in there, and it's important that we reach out to everybody when we are using the data. So the psychological distance between the different actors in there, it's really important that we get the message across. And we simplify. I would love to see the Google of data, where I can just search for data, the web of data, and click education, and then get all the information. Because right now it's overwhelming, the amount of information. If I'm going to search for sources of information for education, I don't know where to start. I love it. I love when I come to these places and I find one more, yeah, and then or two more or 10 more. But it's overwhelming. How do you get to find all the information?
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much. I was wondering how this new it feels a lot like yet another standard when you talk about. So I'm so sorry. For example, we have seen Copernicus mentioned in the last talk, and I wondered how this initiative, especially the Green Data Deal, fits into the Copernicus plan in the EU, for example, which is already a data provider with the goal to provide data to business. A lot of business are actually making value out of Copernicus data, and they are also trying to do education, and I just wonder how this fits.
We're not trying to create yet another standard. Obviously, every single domain and every single sector have their own domain-specific standards. So the issue here is, how do we get across all of them? How do we reach out to all of them? Yeah, how do we get an initiative? Copernicus is a beautiful open data in there, but how does a person then go and find and makes the most out of Copernicus data mixed up with some industrial data that it's out there?
how do we get all that innovation, yeah, which is going to unveil new ways of trying to tackle climate change. So it's not about doing yet another standard at all. It's about finding the bridges and finding the overlap between all the different sectors, which is not an easy task. I mean, all this semantic interoperability is always huge. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or perspectives from the audience? Yeah, if not, then I guess we'll just continue our work with bringing data closer to all of us and all sectors. Thank you very much for participating, and all our speakers will be here for 15 minutes more. So if you have some points in mind that you would like to discuss with us, please come and talk to us. Thank you very much.